Hello and welcome back to Skypothesis. We are two brothers who believe Skyrim to be an endlessly replayable game. With the release of the Anniversary Edition, we decided to make a few builds that highlight the unique content added with the game, taking a break from our usual vanilla seasons. This week we are excited to showcase a sinister, Sith-like Argonian vampire who excels in dark blood magic, and whose life spark is corrupted by a wayward Hist tree in Coldharbour. The Arcane Accessories creation in the Anniversary Edition adds powerful, life-sapping spells to the game that synergize beautifully with the Argonian's natural Hist skin ability, and his gameplay feels much like a corrupt version of our previous build, the Stylight Storm. As always, we take inspiration from all across fantasy entertainment to create our builds, and have included timestamps throughout the video so you can easily navigate between backstory, roleplay, spells, special moves, and more. But we hope you stick with us through the whole video. Without further ado, let's dive right into the loathsome lizard himself, the Shroud of Coldharbour. The Shroud knew his corner of the Black Marsh backwards and forwards, and he would offer his services as a guide into the heart of the swamps. His customers were scholars, adventurers, imperial politicians, and just about anyone who had a reason to travel through the Black Marsh. It's a hostile environment for anyone who's not an Argonian. At this point in his life, he didn't have the ambitions he would later acquire. One year, a group of Synod researchers arrived with a specific destination in mind. The young Shroud was confused as this pocket of the Black Marsh was completely empty. It was nothing but a crater filled in with water. He tried prying information out of them, but they said the secrecy of their mission was paramount, and they would not share any details until they arrived. It troubled him deeply that these Imperials knew something about his native land that he didn't. The less they said, the more curious he became. When they arrived, the Synod began excavating the ruins surrounding the crater. They combed over every rock and explored every nook and cranny. Finally, the leader gave in and informed him this was the site of an ancient village that had been claimed by Coldharbour, back in an era known as Duskfall. When Argonian civilization collapsed so thoroughly, it was centuries before they learned how to communicate with the Hist again by drinking the sap. One Hist tree feared this change and made a bargain with Molag Bal. The Hist tree and the entire village surrounding it were taken from Nirn into Coldharbour, and there they remain to this day. The Shroud was fascinated by this story and couldn't believe it had been kept a secret. He aids in exploring the underwater portions of the crater, but they don't get very far with their investigation. A small army of Argonians sweep in and slaughter the Synod before they have time to react. The Shroud was not killed, but he was banished for helping these scholars. He pressed the leader for an explanation and was told the Hist forbade even mentioning this cursed place, and the one who chose to bargain with the Daedra. The Shroud left the Black Marsh with his world turned upside down. He journeys to Cyrodiil to share the news of the fate of the Synod researchers and hopefully learn magic for himself. He doesn't get very far before realizing this is an organization of two-faced mages who are after political power, and the school portion was just a sham. Disappointed, he heads north to try his luck at the College of Winterhold. Perhaps there he can find those willing to teach him magic, and maybe one day he can gain the knowledge and power needed to uncover the truth of Coldharbour and the Hist tree who bargained with Molag Bal. The journey north is perilous, and he is both bewildered and impressed by the hostile environment of Skyrim. He thinks to himself, it seems the Black Marsh is not the only place where the very land is thirsty for blood. If the barren wastes don't kill the unprepared, the cold certainly will. He is distracted by the snow and blunders right into the Imperial ambush where he is taken with the Stormcloaks as a prisoner of war. After he miraculously survives the Helgen event, he heads to Whiterun by request of the locals at Riverwood. Since he has no obligations, he is not in a rush to get to the College of Winterhold. He has no money, so he agrees to help out the Jarl with Farengar's research. His discovery as Dragonborn is a complete shock. He knows absolutely nothing of Nordic lore or the ancient dragon cult. It is equally overwhelming and fascinating for him, but he is no warrior and only knows a few spells from his brief time with the Synod. He decides to keep a low profile for now and avoid any unwanted attention. He never gives up on his research in the Black Marsh, and he wonders what became of the tribe claimed by Coldharbour. This mystery was an obsession for him, and his curiosity regarding Molag Bal leads him to investigate the vampires of Skyrim closer, and when given the opportunity, he decides to become one himself. By becoming a vampire, he ties his soul to Coldharbour and gains access to greater varieties of blood magic, and this dark brand of sorcery becomes his primary expertise. Argonians are uniquely gifted in blood magic, and he grows his power so rapidly that the other vampires of the court begin to fear him. The concept of blood magic is fascinating to us, and we want to immerse ourselves in all the way it can be roleplayed in Skyrim. We like to headcanon a lot with our characters, and we wonder what blood magic would be like when the caster has 3 different types of blood: vampire blood, dragon blood, and Hist-influenced Argonian blood. As far as we know, there has never before been an Argonian vampire dragonborn in the history of Tamriel, making the Shroud a unique figure with unique magic at his disposal. We also imagine the Hist, who negotiated with Coldharbour, could still be there and could lend a corrupted version of the Hist's strength to the Shroud after he becomes a vampire. Blood magic manifests in a variety of different ways in Skyrim. You have actual spells like Equilibrium and the new Absorb Life spells with the Arcane Accessories pack, plus all the Vampire Lord form spells are a form of blood magic, but there are a bunch of other ways it's used as well. Ariel's bow becomes corrupted by blood magic. The ancient Akaviri used a form of blood magic to seal their temples, and also enchant various relics. The undead Ozadal absorbed life from sacrificial blood spilled on runes in his crypt, and Valerica used blood magic to lock the portal into the soul cairn behind her. Perhaps the most impressive use of blood magic was that of the Dwemer, who sealed away the Ogma Infinium using a very literal form of blood magic. The Shroud's mastery at his craft allows him to aid Septimus in finally unlocking it, and is rewarded by Hermaeus Mora for his feat. These are all fun roleplay moments when you view them through the lens of a character like the Shroud who is a master of blood magic. While he does rapidly advance his power, he begins with only a handful of novice spells at his disposal. When roleplaying as the Shroud of Coldharbour, your first priority should be completing the College of Winterhold questline. This build requires the spell Equilibrium to function, and you do not obtain it until the very end of the college questline. We justify prioritizing the college because he feels completely inadequate against the dragons and desires the power to stand against them. The more he learns, the greater his thirst for knowledge and power becomes. A seed of jealousy begins to grow, and his thirst soon goes unchecked. He has another run-in with the Synod researchers in Mzulft, who again are engaging in a mysterious plot to hoard power and secrets. There are ambitious individuals such as the Synod and the Thalmor who will go to great lengths to hoard ancient sources of power. Here, he realizes that Jazargo was right when he said everything is a competition. He is losing so badly he cannot see it. After obtaining the information he needs, he kills the Synod researcher, ensuring that his discovery will not return to Cyrodiil. This sets him on the path of hoarding power at any cost. He is then sent to Labyrinthian in search of the Staff of Magnus, and this is my personal favorite dungeon and quest in the entire game. Labyrinthian is always an awesome dungeon, but it is the defining moment for the Shroud of Coldharbour. Here, we get the spell Equilibrium, but we roleplay this new spell as the Shroud reaching a breaking point and learning to use his own blood to cast spells from survival instinct. If you think about it, this is the perfect dungeon to introduce blood magic, as Merlkir is wielding the Staff of Magnus to sap you of your magicka at every turn. Surrounded by Draugr, drained of magicka, he instinctively draws magic out of his own blood. Because of this, he is able to stand against Merlkir where Savos Aran couldn't. The Anniversary Edition includes the awesome Creation Club content Arcane Accessories, which include 4 new health leeching spells. When combined with Equilibrium, you are in a constant state of change, with health either being drained or gained, or both at the same time. Because these new leeching spells are destruction spells, they are amplified with Fortify Destruction potions, which he will make great use of. Alchemy is the true power of this build, and when all these mechanics are meshing together, your offensive power and defense from leeching life reach a state of equilibrium, if you will, and it's incredibly satisfying to pull off. We'll dive further into this during the spells portion of the video. After becoming Archmage, he considers it his right to act on the authority of his title, and he begins hoarding sources of great magical power. Rumors of powerful artifacts would likely pass through the underbelly of society, so he joins the Thieves Guild and mingles with well-connected individuals to pick up on possible heists. He becomes fond of Riften and the thieves of the Ratway, so he decides to make a permanent home underneath the city. We chose Shadowfoot Sanctum to be his home base, as it's water accessible from the docks. We imagine this makes it difficult to access for anyone who isn't an Argonian. Down here, he can safely hoard his powerful artifacts, create a secret arcane workshop, and plot his next escapades. At this point, it's fun to jump back and forth between faction quests, role-playing a wizard spreading his influence to keep an eye on sources of power. The Dark Brotherhood is interesting as their very existence requires using a form of blood magic to contact the Night Mother. The Thieves Guild are resourceful and useful allies to have watching his back, plus he puts his skill with illusion magic to good use, and it makes him a natural thief. Obtaining Ariel's bow should be the next priority after the College of Winterhold, but feel free to go at your own pace. The Shroud fiercely guards his power and shares it with nobody. He hates the thought of rivals stealing the power he has gained, so Harkon, Alduin, and Miraak are seen as adversaries, and he spends his days preparing to take them down. He learns every form of blood magic, he advances the power of his Thu'um, he finds every corrupted source of power, and he makes deals with the Daedra. He is a lawful evil character with some neutral evil tendencies. He doesn't value the lives of others at all, but he also doesn't just kill without cause. His ambitions are beyond that of a common cutthroat. He is a mage first, Nightblade second. Over time, he slowly becomes a once-in-history sorcerer. He becomes to blood magic what Mannimarco was to necromancy. Moving on to spells and shouts. He is a hemomancer, which means he casts magic with his own blood. Sometimes casting blood magic spells, or drawing magic out of his own blood to cast spells of other schools like illusion. In Destruction, he will use Vampiric Drain and the 4 new leeching spells, Choking Grasp, Strangulation, Hangman's Noose, and Touch of Death. Note that the new spells apply a damage over time that lasts 3 seconds. Touch of Death is the expert level spell and it lasts 4 seconds, making it by far the best option once you can comfortably cast it. The playstyle is completely different from anything we've played before, and we had to get used to waiting until the spell wore off before casting it a second time, as multiple casts don't stack with each other. Use moments between casts to replenish magicka with equilibrium. Another thing that took some getting used to was the incredibly short range of these spells. They are not projectiles, and the range is so tiny that you usually can't hit dragons until they land. Honestly, this is a fair trade-off considering how unkillable you can become while leeching life. These spells all have a strange interaction with Skyrim's ragdoll physics currently, and they launch enemies vertically according to how much overkill damage you deal. So a dual cast Touch of Death absolutely catapults weak enemies. But dealing just the right amount of damage will make enemies just collapse instead. By far, the most satisfying kills are plain old skeletons who just explode and send bones flying everywhere. It's a lot of fun. We did make a conscious choice to never use restoration spells for this build. He heals by leeching life from others, and the healing light of restoration magic just doesn't fit the dark vibe of this character at all to us. Leeching is his primary mechanic, but you can always craft healing potions as well. Plus there's Hist skin and other powers like Mora's Boon to fall back on if needed. No restoration also means no necromage, which again is intentional as the leeching spells are plenty powerful. Though they don't kill as quickly as other options, they are consistent and they allow you to outlast your enemies. The only mobs that are immune to leeching are Dwarven Automatons and Ash Spawn, so he'll need to use Elemental Destruction to bring those down. The other important school of magic is Illusion, which he uses for crowd control and Dark Brotherhood shenanigans. He will use all of the spells available in this school depending on the context. Normally, illusion is thought to be tricking or influencing the mind of others, but for this character, it's fun to imagine it in the context of the bloodbending in Avatar: The Last Airbender, harnessing another's blood to manipulate them like a puppet. Also, it's worth mentioning Arcane Accessories adds a new illusion spell that allows you to bypass any lock expert level or lower. This is insanely powerful, but it's in the game now, so why not make use of it? Lockpicking can get tedious anyway, so it's nice to have access to the Tower Stone without using the Ethereal Crown. To acquire all the new spells, head east of Dawnstar to Hobbs Fall Cave. There is a chest here containing all of the new spells, so no need to buy them. For shouts, he will need to use Dragon Rend to bring down dragons to leeching range, though he can always resort to shock spells while they're flying around. Other relevant shouts are Drain Vitality to stack with his damage over time, Soul Tear, Dismay, and Stormcall. Now let's dig into creating the character. Until your enchanting is maxed out, keep an eye out for gear that fortifies destruction or fortifies magicka. The Archmage robes are a great option once you obtain them, especially when paired with the Ring of the Beast for an extra 100 points of health. Once you have maxed out your enchanting, you can craft your final robes. He will wear hooded black robes enchanted with Fortify Health and Fortify Destruction, a gold ruby necklace with Resist Magic and Fortify Destruction, the Bonehawk ring with Fortify Health and Fortify Illusion, Vampire gauntlets with Fortify Magicka and Fortify Stealth, and finally, Vampire boots with Resist Fire and Resist Shock. Note that we are intentionally using robes that also take up the headpiece slot. For another mage, this might be a problem, but when this character is fully kitted out, the power level is insane, and another enchanted piece would push the power into unwanted territory where the gameplay would just become boring. Keep in mind, the true power of this build comes from alchemy, so it's a worthwhile trade-off in our opinion not to use a headpiece. Plus, we've always loved the look of the plain black robes on Argonians, and we felt they give off a dark Sith Lord vibe. When paired with a pale-scaled Argonian, he just looks like he walked off the page of a fantasy book. It's important to wait until your enchanting is maxed out before crafting this gear, as there is only one unenchanted version of these robes in the game, and only one Bonehawk ring as well. The ring is in a display case in Harkon's room, and the robes are on a shelf in the Felglow Keep library. Enchanted versions do spawn abundantly if you want to get the aesthetic earlier. These only add 50% magicka regeneration, but gear doesn't matter as much when you can just use Equilibrium to replenish your magicka and then a leech spell to regain your health. You can get this character looking the part as soon as you want, and just settle for using Equilibrium a little bit more often. In addition to your main robes, you will always want to craft the best Fortify Alchemy set you can while leveling. You can craft gloves, rings, amulets, and headpieces with enchantments that boost the power of your potions. When enchanting is maxed out, your final alchemy set will contain 4 pieces of gear that each improve your skill by 25%, effectively doubling the power of your potions. This can push your power into insane territory, and since offense is directly related to defense, it makes you nearly unkillable when leeching. We usually balance our builds for Adept, but this is a character that's a candidate for higher difficulties, and you may find it more fun to play on at least Expert from the beginning. And to address the elephant in the room, this is a build that uses 2 crafting skills, but they synergize so well that it's totally worth it to us. The only rush to maxing out enchanting is to get your final robes, but this character has an incredibly linear progression of power. This isn't one of those mages that requires max enchanting to feel great. The only barrier is in that of acquiring Equilibrium. As long as you are crafting potions to boost the power of destruction, the build feels great from start to finish. Speaking of potions, let's talk about the specific brews that the Shroud of Coldharbour will use. The first, and by far most important one, is a concoction that we call Spark of Life. This is a dual effect potion that fortifies destruction and health, and the best part is it's made from plantable ingredients: glowing mushroom, nightshade, and wheat. With the Anniversary Edition, you can plant these in the garden behind the Tundra homestead without even owning the house, so you should start stockpiling these as soon as possible. When alchemy is maxed out, these potions improve destruction by 75%. When wearing your fully enchanted alchemy gear, this will be raised to a whopping 150%. With one of these potions, it only took 2 dual casts of Touch of Death to bring down a frost giant in the Forgotten Vale on Adept difficulty. Because of how this build works mechanically, increasing your destruction power also increases your survivability, as your leeching rate is insane, and you can quickly replenish your health after taking a hit. The drain on health from Equilibrium is easily out-leeched, and you can keep it active in one hand and cast Touch of Death in the other. The next brew is called Elixir of the Beast, which fortifies health and one-handed. This is used situationally and mainly for harvesting souls. He wields the Mace of Molag Bal and uses it to harvest souls for crafting. It's also incredibly useful while on horseback, as we are not perking one-handed. This potion will allow you to easily dispatch the sort of wild animals and bandits you encounter on the roadsides. He is still a stealthy character and doesn't charge in headfirst on horseback, but nothing is more annoying than having to waste time dismounting to engage with a pack of ice wolves. Having these potions on hand will allow you to freely travel from place to place on Shadowmere. The final brew is called Filter of the Marionette. This is a triple effect potion that fortifies illusion and magicka regeneration, and restores magicka, and it's made from only 2 ingredients, dwarven oil and taproot. This is a useful potion for a few reasons. First is to have a quick way to deal with having no magicka. Even though Equilibrium costs health, for some reason the game doesn't allow you to cast the spell at all if your magicka has bottomed out at 0. This means you are totally out of luck, since we have no source of magicka during the day. Also, illusion spells are useful for crowd control, and this potion will ensure he will always be able to affect even the toughest of enemies. One thing to note is that you will need the alchemy perk Purity to make this, otherwise it will include a 4th effect, Weakness to Magic. Moving on to stats and perk spread. Destruction mages are usually the most challenging at the very beginning of the game, so we recommend leveling up magicka for the first 10 levels. Once you have 200, put all further level ups into health. He will use Equilibrium to use his own blood to cast spells, so the lower magicka pool is part of the roleplay. For the Standing Stone, we are using the Lady Stone for the boost to health and stamina regen, which allows vampires to be more functional during the daylight, but in this character's case, it also improves his natural gameplay even more. Finally, we are playing as an Argonian, because it fits with the character's story and the amazing racial ability Hist skin. Plus, Argonians are said to be naturally adept at blood magic. By the time you hit level 40, you will want the following perks. In Illusion, take the entire tree with the exception of the Master perk. We didn't quite have this skill maxed out by level 40 in our playthrough, but you will certainly want to take the Master perk if you keep progressing into higher levels. Though, when buffed by alchemy, even the Adept level spells are plenty powerful. In Destruction, take the Novice through Expert perks and Dual Casting. In spite of this being the most important skill tree, none of the remaining perks are relevant to the blood magic spells, and since they are not a projectile, they do not benefit from the Impact perk. In Alchemy, take all 5 perks in Alchemist, Physician, Benefactor, 1 in Experimenter, Snake Blood, and Purity. He is not a poisoner, so these are the only perks that are relevant. Purity will be important to make Filter of the Marionette without the negative Weakness to Magic effect. In Enchanting, take all 5 in Enchanter and head up the middle of the tree to get extra effect. This is a build that uses 2 crafting skills, but again, it's not mandatory to grind this skill early. Alchemy is much more important, so focus on that skill first and just progress Enchanting at a natural pace. Note that we also took the Fire perk on this tree to boost the resistance on his boots. Since he's a vampire, this extra 25% comes in handy. Finally, in Sneak, take just 3 perks in Stealth. Beyond level 40, this tree should be the next one to focus on, and you should head all the way up the left spiral to get Shadow Warrior. Vampires already have a 25% boost to stealth, which makes this less of a priority while leveling. If you plan to keep going, we could imagine this character gaining an interest in learning necromancy and adding conjuration to his toolkit, but it's totally not necessary. Stealth and illusion make him formidable at crowd control, and his brand of destruction makes him nearly unkillable in one-on-one combat, even against dragons, something that illusion mages usually struggle against. Some additional perks to obtain are Sindarian Serendipity, which gives you a chance to craft 2 potions instead of 1, Seeker of Sorcery, which reduces spell cost by 10%, Mora's Boon, which replenishes all your stats once per day, useful to get yourself out of a sticky situation, and finally, Shadow Cloak of Nocturnal, which is integral to one of his special moves. Even though he can use illusion to turn invisible, he has a low magicka pool, so this allows you to enter and exit invisibility seamlessly while saving your magicka for offensive spells. Alright, moving on to our favorite part of each build, the special moves. Most of his special moves focus on manifestations of blood magic in the world of Skyrim. His unique brand of sorcery is due to having a combination of Dragon's Blood, Vampire Lord Blood, and Argonian Blood, whose life spark is corrupted by a wayward history in Coldharbour. His first special move is called Possession, which combines the Dismay Shout, Shadow Cloak of Nocturnal, Filter of the Marionette, and then Frenzy. First, use Dismay on as many enemies as you can when they're clustered together. Then use Shadow Cloak of Nocturnal, which allows you to enter a flow state of uninterrupted chances to enter and exit invisibility. This will allow you to save your magicka pool for casting frenzy spells one at a time on enemies. We roleplay he possesses them, like a bloodbender in Avatar, and forces them to fight their friends. Enemies flee in terror lest this invisible force seizes control of their bodies and mind. Up next is Volkahar's Siphon, which combines Spark of Life, Dual Cast Vampiric Drain, and Blood of the Ancients. This is a spell formerly unique to the Redwater clan of vampires, but now has been added into the halls of the mighty Volkahar and greatly improved upon. Blood of the Ancients is the perk added from drinking out of the Bloodstone Chalice, and it augments your Vampiric Drain spell to also absorb magicka and stamina. We amplify this effect further by dual casting the spell and adding Spark of Life. This is useful to have on hand during moments when you need to spend time outdoors under the oppressive rays of the sun. Vampiric Drain is still fairly weak, but its purpose is to give you an easy way to replenish all 3 of your stats at once. Up next is the staple of this build, Hist Blood Ritual. Use the Argonian racial power Hist skin, then cast Equilibrium in one hand, and a Spark of Life enhanced destruction spell in the other. With this move, he calls on the Hist's life spark in his own blood to rapidly replenish his life force. The regeneration effect from his skin will significantly outpace the drain from Equilibrium, and you can maintain full health, full magicka, and unleash a barrage of destruction spells. While his skin is active, you don't need to use leeching spells to replenish your health, which opens up all sorts of elemental spell opportunities. The unbounded spells are particularly fun here. Up next is Roots of Umbriel, which is the combination of Sleeping Tree Sap and the greater power Bones of Earth. The sap gives you an extra 100 points of health, but slows your movement speed. Bones of Earth reduces 80% of all physical damage while active. When these two effects are combined, we imagine magical Hist roots sinking into the ground, holding him in place when he needs to endure an offensive onslaught. He identifies the sleeping tree as a Hist-like sapling that must have grown from a spore fallen off the ancient floating Isle of Umbriel. Though not a Hist tree, it is related to them with deep ancient magic. He returns here often to harvest the sap, careful not to damage the tree or disturb the giants who have taken to guarding it. His final special move is called Eye of the Dragon. This combines Blood-Cursed Ariel's Bow, Stormcall, Unbounded Storms, and Hist Blood Ritual. This is the ultimate manifestation of blood magic. Vurthur's prophecy states that the blood of a daughter of Coldharbour shall blind the eye of the dragon. By corrupting the power of the gods with blood magic, he darkens the sun and unleashes a rift of power from Coldharbour. We absolutely love the combination of Stormcall and Ariel's Bow. The light dims and the weather turns hostile at his command, and he becomes a conduit, channeling the power of blood in one hand and the power of the storms in the other. Hist Blood Ritual will allow you to maintain the onslaught of unbounded storms for as long as the powers last. Note that this only works outdoors, so for interior spaces, you can do a frost variant of this and use Unbounded Freezing and either Blizzard or Northwind. And with those special moves completed, we are ready to wrap up this video for the Shroud of Coldharbour. We had an absolute blast creating this build based around blood magic and Argonian lore, and we hope you enjoy playing as the Shroud as much as we did. This is a build that really requires at least the Arcane Accessories pack to function, and the gameplay feels incredibly unique. If you are looking for a fresh playthrough, we highly recommend giving this build a try. It takes some practice to get used to, but once you reach that flow state where you are leeching more health than you are spending, it's a satisfying feeling and something you really just need to experience to understand. As always, thanks for liking and subscribing to help us keep the magic of Skyrim alive. We'll see you next time, right here on Skypothesis.